What is good, everyone? Hope you guys are doing well. And as you can see, I have a really awesome guest and a big guest, one of the most respected voices in the Chicago Bears community in Robert Schmitz. And, it's totally an honor to be talking to him. And we are going to talk about some amazing topics here. We're going to talk about Andy Dalton. We're, of course, going to dive into Justin, what Robert is seeing from the tape on when he thinks that Justin will start. We're going to talk about Matt Nagy. We're going to talk about the offensive line. And if you know Robert, Robert has a different view on what Charles Leno really brings to Chicago Bears in terms of that left tackle position. So we're going to talk that. Then on the defensive side of the ball, we're going to talk about Robert Quinn. We're going to talk about if Robert Quinn can be that guy. And if not, Robert here is really big on Travis Gibson and what he can provide to this team. So we're going to dive into that, and we're going to dive into the cornerback position and also possibly the safety position. But before you guys do that, make sure to go and smash that like button. Make sure to go and subscribe to my channel and Robert's channel so you can get the best Bears content. But with that all being said, Robert, how are you doing today? How is it going?
I'm doing great. I mean, the season's right about to start for the Bears. It already started last night with a phenomenal game between the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. So we're about to dig into this. And I'll tell you what, I've watched the 2019 Bears season where Mitch Trubisky went from being the guy to maybe not. And then we watched the 2020 season, which was just a disaster front to back. It felt like, I can't believe they made the playoffs. Don't get me wrong. But man, that 6-game losing streak with Foles was just like clawing your own eyes out. And so this season with Andy Dalton and Justin Fields waiting in the wings, I refuse to be negative about it. Whatever happens, even though the schedule looks like a nightmare, we have Bears football. We only get that 4 to 5 months a year. I'm going to savor every week, and I hope you are too.
I am too, and I know by the time of this video is coming out, we would have known the score of the Bears game and of the Rams game. But I like to be positive here, and one of the questions I'm asking to all my guests here is when the Bears drafted Justin Fields, when it was at 10 minutes, when the Broncos were picking, honestly, did you expect us to land the guy's jersey I'm wearing right now, Justin Fields? Did you expect that at all? What was going through your head?
I mean, just like every other Bears fan, I was just hoping and praying, right? I had my hands together. I was wringing my fingers. I was sitting there because I'm super high on Fields. I've been high on Fields since I watched his Nebraska game, which was his first game back this year in 2020. And so when Carolina got up to bat, I thought to myself, oh, he's gone. I mean, that would make a lot of sense for them. And then they picked the cornerback whose name escapes me right now. And so I think it was Hill, but I can't quite remember because I've got DB's names floating around everywhere. Then the Broncos came up, and that felt like a slam dunk. I mean, we're done here. It's over. They need a quarterback. They've got Drew Lock. Justin Fields fell to them, and they went with Patrick Surtain. So all of a sudden, the Eagles come up, and they trade up, no less, with Dallas. And I'm thinking, that's it. That's it. The Eagles went analytics. They drafted Justin Fields. They didn't take him. And then the Bears trade up with the Giants. I had hope in my heart that the Bears would get Fields. I knew they were trading up for Jones if they didn't get Fields. So it was just a matter of when, not if. But when they did have the opportunity to take Justin, they drafted him. I mean, it changed everything. I think that's fair to say. We were all prepared for a full 2021 season with Andy Dalton at the helm. Then we got Fields, and it feels like the arrow went from way down, everybody's right about to get fired, to holy crap, what is this team going to be going forward? So we'll have to see what that looks like. And I know you've got more questions, but as far as draft day, I mean, it was, in my opinion, the biggest draft miracle I've ever seen for the Chicago Bears organization. I think to not frame it that way is whether Fields busts or not, to not frame it that way would be unfair. It was miraculous that Fields fell as far as he did, that the Bears had the opportunity to reset the franchise with him. And so, I mean, I'm stoked. Whatever happens from here.
They always say in life, you'll never see it coming. And when the Bears picked Justin Fields, that was something I did not see coming because, we were watching that season. We were like, okay, we're picking at 20. This year's not going to be a bad year. We're probably going to win maybe 5 to 6 games with Andy Dalton. We'll probably have a top 10 pick. and we'll go into this draft. But a draft that's not necessarily as talented as last year's draft. When we picked Justin, sure, there are guys like Malik Harris. There are that guy from Ole Miss who's very talented, but they're certainly not that Justin Fields. They're certainly not that Trevor Lawrence of this year's draft in next year's draft. And we expected, hey, we'll get a quarterback next year. And all of a sudden we picked Justin Fields and everything changes. There's hope. We just had, that Bears season, we just came off a super bad press conference with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy when
the collaboration one.
Yeah, the collaboration one. We're just saying, oh yeah, sure the season was bad, but hey, we're collaborating. That's a win. So we had that, and it was just tough, and there was no hope. And then draft night comes around and we're saying, hey, we'll take a tackle. Maybe we pick like Tevin Jenkins. Maybe we pick someone like Tevin Jenkins with 20. But lo and behold, not only do we get Justin Fields, but we also get Tevin Jenkins, and that's what I want to ask you about next. Let's dive into the left tackle position. What are your thoughts on Tev? Is he going to play this year? I want to know what you feel.
It's hard to know. I mean, I'm always hesitant when it comes to injuries. I'm not a doctor. And so for all I've learned from watching football now for 15, 16 years is that anything from a concussion to obviously a back surgery can always be worse than billed. And rarely do these players truly come back like the exact same. Tariq Cohen, for instance, tore his ACL. He should have been out between 6 to 9 months, and here 11 months later, I don't get the impression he's walking properly yet. So I don't know what happened there. Maybe he retore something, but that's not who you asked me about. So we'll get back on track. The point is that you can tell me that a 22, 23, 24-year-old had a minor back procedure all you want to. When a 300-pound man gets back work done, I have to wait and see. So I'm not trying to wave the red flag. There are a lot of people that are ringing this like horrible alarm bell saying he's the next Kevin White. And we didn't know Kevin White was Kevin White until 3 years down the road. And maybe even worse, when White did play, he didn't look particularly good. We've not seen Tevin Jenkins play a down in a Bears uniform yet. So I think it's not fair to him to immediately staple him with the like he's a bust flag. But at the same time, for a 2021 Bears team that needed help on the offensive line, you're about to ask me about Leno. I know you are. Like, with Leno or without Leno, they still weren't going to be great. It stinks to see that they lost their left tackle to be, and now maybe he'll move over to right tackle. Maybe this gives Larry Borom a chance, but either way, we're working the bright side a little bit harder, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think that's the hope. Larry Borom becomes that left tackle, Tevin Jenkins becomes that right tackle, and we have a young offensive core, going into years forward, with eventually Justin Fields taking over that quarterback spot come next year, or later this season. We'll talk about it. But that's the hope, though. That's the hope that every Chicago Bears fan has, that Larry Borom can be that franchise left tackle, and Tev can be that franchise left tackle, because what people are not talking about enough, and what I've kind of seen from Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace that makes me go like, I don't know, is Tevin Jenkins playing left tackle. Tevin Jenkins, I researched it quite a bit, and Tevin Jenkins in college, for the most part, was a right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
He did play left tackle for a few games when other people were injured, but for the most part, he was a right tackle. That is when he was most effective. To move a guy from right tackle to left tackle, not in college, but in the NFL, that's a hard transition. And a guy who's going to be kind of behind with that experience since he's not playing a full season. So if I'm the Bears, if I'm Matt Nagy, I would play Tevin Jenkins at right tackle. And I'm sure you agree with me, but looking at the tape, what can you say from that perspective?
So the Jenkins situation is a particularly weird one because, like you're saying, he was a right tackle for basically all of his life. Then for his senior year, or at least the most recent year, in preparation to get drafted, he moved over to the left-hand side. And then the right tackle got hurt and he moved back. And then as soon as the season was over, he went back to practicing at left tackle again. So honest opinion, I don't actually know which side he prefers at this point. I think he wanted to play left tackle because left tackles tend to get paid more even today, no matter how many people say left tackle and right tackle are basically the same. Like, they're correct, but you can get a cheaper right tackle, and I imagine Jenkins wanted to set himself up for money. But going forward, if they've got Borom at left tackle and they actually think he can become something, and he's pretty raw, so he'll need time. Like, let's get this out of the way. Borum's got the right frame. He's got fairly quick feet, but he's not ready to play yet. And Bears fans don't need to be rushing him, just like we didn't rush Travis Gibson last year. But at this point, all I think the Bears would be concerned about with is just getting bookends set. So again, if they don't end up liking Borum, maybe they keep Jenkins at left tackle and he just goes from there and they move Borum over. But if they do like Borum enough to play him there, moving him over makes a lot of sense. You want to get the most valuable value out of your draft picks, and that would certainly be a way to do it.
Yeah, and so here's my thing. I'm going to ask you about Charles Leno right now. So
Sure.
Here's my thing. So Charles Leno, like him or hate him, I know there was some plays where Charles Leno wasn't that guy, where he kind of allowed pressure in Mitch, and that was part of the reason why Mitch failed here in Chicago, but that's a topic for a different day. But
it's true,
Charles,
though. That's the key. Even people positive about Leno will tell you it's not as if Leno was one of the league's best offensive tackles. The key to this discussion, as I'm sure you've picked up on, is that the standard, like, replacement level NFL lineman looks like Elijah Wilkinson. And as we saw in the preseason, Elijah Wilkinson got embarrassed plenty of times. And as much as we've seen similar things from Leno, the better way to put it is, if the average replacement level player on a scale of 1 to 10 clocks in at a 3, maybe even a 2.5, Leno was a 4, maybe a 4.5. It's not that he was great. He was barely even good. He was just fine. And given the fact that Sam Mustafer has a ton to prove this year, and Germain Ifedi certainly looks like he's starting off his year on the wrong foot, maybe keeping that extra tackle so that you weren't betting everything on a rookie would have been smart. But either way, they had to find the money somewhere. They were clearly intent on keeping Jimmy Graham, as we've seen from their recent move. So it's kind of water under the bridge at this point, especially with Leno struggling in Washington. Maybe they knew something the rest of us didn't.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Charles Leno. I'll be honest with my fans here. I am a little bit biased because I've had the unique opportunity to talk to someone like Charles Leno Instagram DMs. Like, this guy interacts with me. Of course, I'm gonna love the guy. And I love his character, but Charles Leno also brought you a certain amount of reliability. He started in most of his games here in Chicago. Sure,
all of them.
Maybe they weren't the best, but he was healthy. He was there, and he could play in every single game. And that's why when I saw them, getting rid of him, I said, I don't know about this. But then I believed, okay, maybe Tev could be that guy. And lo and behold, and they signed Elijah Wilkinson, who I don't necessarily believe in. I would honestly rather have Charles Leno than Elijah Wilkinson, just because I think Charles Leno has more potential. Also, Elijah Wilkinson has penalty issues, and in that first game, he had a penalty that really cost us a drive against the Dolphins, and that did not do us any good. So Elijah Wilkinson still has issues from Denver, but I believe in someone like Juan Castillo who can fix those raw issues that he has, and I think that Elijah Wilkinson can be that young left tackle that we possibly need. And then they also got Jason Peters, who is probably going to start. And I love Jason Peters, our future Hall of Famer. He did look a little bit better than Charles Leno in the Titans game. He had that one rush, but other than that, he was pretty good. But he's 39. Can he stay healthy the full season? Because when you're 39, I'm telling you, injuries pop up. Injuries are going to take you out at that age. And that's just my view on this whole left tackle position.
Oh, yeah. I think the hardest part about this is that I get the impression Bears fans have focused too much on the left tackle spot. Peters looks like a godsend. Seriously, he was signed off of a fishing boat and came in and already looked better than basically the entire Bears offensive line. Like, I am not trying to be hyperbolic here. All we saw was one half of preseason action, so we don't need to take this too seriously. But James Daniels isn't getting a ton of push out of the right guard spot. New position for him. Sam Mustafer looks pretty weak as far as the center goes, to where I think Bears fans are realistically hoping for him to turn in a below average season instead of outright bad. Like, the ceiling is below average. Germain Ifedi looked slow. Like, Germain Ifedi looked replaceable. If if not needing to be replaced. So hopefully he gets things cleaned up. And frankly, I honestly think, Adabeth, that that's like the primary issue here, is that as much as replacing Charles Leno may have gotten us an ever so slight upgrade in a Jason Peters that looks fresh for now, and that's assuming he stays healthy, it's the center spot, it's the right guard spot, it's the right tackle spot, like basically everybody other than Whitehair, that I think we've got at best major question marks, and at worst really big things to worry about. So whether it's Andy or Fields, this offensive line has a lot of questions that need to be answered by 2022, or else we should see major change.
Yeah, and the center position does worry me a little bit. I know some people are very, very high on Sam Mustafer, but here's my thing. I think Sam Mustafer can be that guy. I'm not denying that, but I think that teams did not know who Sam Mustafer was and they're not game plan. Now they're going to. You know, it's funny. I want to compare the Sam Mustafer position to the Week 3 Falcons game. The reason that Nick Foles was so successful is because the Falcons coach did not see Nick Foles starting. Just like how many NFL head coaches did not see Sam Mustafer starting, and even when he did, they didn't expect him. They did not game plan against Sam Mustafer, and now Sam Mustafer is gonna have the biggest test of his life against Aaron Donald, and the people here, to say the least, and the people here listening, by the time this video is out, will know how he would have done. So Sam Mustafer, by the time you're watching this video, has either did good, or he's someone that we're talking about right now on Twitter as this video is coming out.
I think one of the scariest things about Mustafer is, and this is just, look, I'm about to soapbox a little. Are you ready? But
Yeah.
One of the weirdest things about being a content creator is that if you want to sound the alarm bell about somebody, you come across kind of mean or callous. Like, I remember I've been talking about how Sam Mustafer has really never shown a tremendous amount of promise for the better part of about a year, but it sounds like I'm just coming after a UDFA, and that's not fair because I'm not expecting huge things from Sam. I just know that some people have anointed him as a future All-Pro, and that happens. But we'll have to see what goes on from here. I am a little surprised that the Bears didn't pull in Austin Reeder from Kansas City, given their affinity for Kansas City players and the fact that Reeder looked like a very decent center in and of himself. But we'll see what happens. At the moment, the current two centers, from what I understand, are Sam Mustafer and Alex Bars, who had never played center up until last year. So I would not say the Bears' depth at offensive line is very strong, but I honestly wouldn't tell you that their starters are either. And if I was going to be really honest with you, that worries me not just for the sake of like Andy Dalton and so on and so forth, but mostly for the sake of the Bears' running game. And if the Bears can't run the ball, whether it's the Rams, Cincinnati, the Browns, or anybody this year, if they can't run the ball, they have to win the game entirely off the arm of their quarterback. And let me ask you, do you think Andy is the kind of guy to win those kinds of games?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't think so. And I think that even with Justin, you know, talking about this briefly before we dive into this more, Justin is a guy who needs that time. You know, there was a stat out that Justin had one of the slowest processing times in the NFL. And that's probably because of the offensive line that the Bears had. But he needs to read his guys. He needs to read where his guys are, and we need to give him some time. And if Sam Mustafa is going to be a liability, it's just going to make Justin's job a lot harder. So, you know, that's just my view on that. What's up, buddy? Hope you enjoyed that video where me and Robert Schmitz talking about the issues that Chicago Bears have about the offensive line. And although that was recorded before the Rams game, I think it's predominant right now with the injuries to Larry Borom and Jason Peters. And this is just part one of my conversation. In further parts, we're going to talk about Jimmy Graham, why the Chicago Bears restricted his contract. We're going to talk about Travis Gibson, the Chicago Bears decision at quarterback, whether to start Justin Fields, and when to bench Andy Dalton, and much, much more. So make sure you're subscribed, make sure you hit bell notifications, and make sure to go leave video a big thumbs up and smash that like button. Now, with that all being said, peace out. Thank you so much for watching, and Bear